In some of your movies, you're going to be perhaps kissing your wife in front of, 3 trillion people watching around the world.
Anyone who's been in any romance movies, it's not a romantic movie, knows there's nothing romantic about love scenes in movies. It can't be this.
She was the
Remember Linda Kozlowski? Try not to gasp when you see her today. She stood in the middle of the Australian outback, canteen in hand, when a fake crocodile lunged out of the water and turned her into one of the most recognized faces on the planet almost overnight. 40 years later, she walks through Venice Beach or the winding streets of Marrakesh, and almost nobody stops her. No cameras. No crowds. Just a woman in her late 60s, quietly living a life that looks nothing like the one Hollywood built for her. So what actually happened to Sue Charlton? Where did she go, why did she really leave, and what does she look like now? Stick around, because the real story is stranger, and honestly more admirable, than anything the tabloids ever printed about her. Long before she was sharing the screen with Paul Hogan, Linda Kozlowski was just a kid from Fairfield, Connecticut, the daughter of a family of Polish descent. She graduated from Andrew Ward High School in 1976, and from there her path took a turn that a lot of people wouldn't expect from a future action comedy leading lady. She enrolled at the Juilliard School in New York City, one of the most demanding performing arts programs in the world, and came out the other side in 1981 with a degree in drama. This wasn't someone who fell into acting by accident or got discovered at a mall. She trained for it, seriously, alongside classmates who would go on to become respected names in film and television themselves. Her early career reflected that seriousness. She didn't start with movie premieres and magazine covers. She started off Broadway, in a 1981 production called How It All Began, doing the unglamorous work of building a craft from the ground up. She picked up small television roles too, including an appearance on the series Nurse in 1982, the kind of steady, low-visibility work that most working actors spend years doing before anyone outside the industry knows their name. In 1984 she landed the role of Miss Forsyth in a Broadway production of Death of a Salesman, and a year later she reprised that same role in the film adaptation. It was solid, respected theater work, the sort of resume that suggested a career built on craft rather than image. Nobody watching her at that point could have predicted what was about to happen. In 1986, Linda auditioned for a film with a fairly modest budget and a fairly unusual premise. An Australian comedy about a rugged bushman navigating the streets of New York City. The role of Sue Charlton wasn't necessarily written with her in mind, but something about her audition connected, and she was cast opposite a then relatively unknown Australian comedian named Paul Hogan. That film was Crocodile Dundee, and nobody involved could have fully anticipated what it would become. It turned into a genuine global phenomenon, pulling in hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office and turning both of its stars into instant international icons. Linda's performance as Sue, the sharp, curious American journalist who travels to the outback and falls for Hogan's character, resonated with audiences everywhere. The film earned her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actress in 1987, a serious mark of recognition for a performer who was, until recently, doing off-Broadway theater. Almost overnight, she went from a trained stage actress with a handful of credits to one of the most photographed women in the world. Magazine covers, talk shows, red carpets, all of it arrived at once, and it arrived fast. What happened behind the camera turned out to be just as significant as what happened on screen. Linda and Paul Hogan's on-screen chemistry didn't stay on screen. During filming, a real connection developed between them, and by 1990 the two had married in a ceremony in Byron Bay, Australia. It's worth pointing out that this wasn't a simple fairy tale beginning. Hogan was still married to his first wife, Nolene, at the time their relationship began, and the two eventually separated so he and Linda could be together. It was a complicated public start to a marriage that would go on to last more than 2 decades. In 1996, the couple welcomed a son together, Chance Hogan, and for years the family navigated life together in the public eye, with Linda continuing to appear alongside Hogan in the further Crocodile Dundee sequels, first Crocodile Dundee 2 in 1988, and later Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles in 2001. But away from the sequels and the premieres, something else was happening to Linda professionally, and it's a pattern plenty of actors from that era will recognize instantly. The success of the first film effectively locked her into a single identity. Producers wanted Sue Charlton, or some close variation of her, and the range of roles being offered to her narrowed sharply. She spoke about this herself, years later, with a bluntness that a lot of former stars don't allow themselves. Talking to the Scripps Howard News Service in 2001, she described the kind of projects that were landing on her desk by that point as straight-to-video films that left her miserable on set, saying they were basically giving her an ulcer, because she felt like she was the only person on set who actually cared about getting the work right. That's not a vague, PR-softened explanation. That's an actress describing genuine professional frustration, the kind that builds quietly over years until it becomes impossible to ignore. Back in 1988, she'd already been telling the Los Angeles Times that after the first Dundee film she'd turned down a long string of scripts, most of which just wanted her to play the girlfriend to some comedic leading man, a narrow, secondary role dressed up in different settings each time. It's the classic trap of a breakout role. The film that makes you famous can also be the film that boxes you in, and Linda experienced that boxing in about as directly as any actress of her generation. By 2001, after appearing in the third Dundee film, Linda made a decision that a lot of people in her position don't make. She walked away from acting almost entirely. Not with a farewell tour, not with a dramatic press conference, just a quiet stepping back from an industry that, by her own account, had stopped offering her anything that felt worth doing. It's worth sitting with how unusual that choice actually is. She had global recognition, a Golden Globe nomination, and a name that could still open doors. Plenty of actors in her position would have kept taking whatever roles came along just to stay visible, just to keep the checks coming and the name in circulation. Linda didn't do that. She chose to stop, and she's been fairly consistent in her public comments since then about why. She wanted work that challenged her, and Hollywood, at that particular stage of her career, wasn't offering it. Her personal life went through its own significant shift not long after. She and Paul Hogan, married since 1990, separated in 2013, and their divorce was finalized the following year, bringing an end to a 23-year marriage. The reasons given publicly were straightforward: irreconcilable differences. Two people who had simply grown apart after decades together. Hogan himself later described their relationship candidly, saying the two of them were essentially opposites who had been drawn to each other for a long time. Linda has been just as direct. Speaking about the marriage afterward, she pointed to the imbalance that comes with being married to someone as famous and larger-than-life as Hogan, noting that he was very famous and that she'd lived for a long time in his shadow. That's a striking thing for anyone to admit publicly, let alone someone who was, in her own right, a Golden Globe-nominated actress recognized around the world. It suggests that even with her own considerable fame, being married to Paul Hogan meant existing, in many rooms, primarily as Paul Hogan's wife, rather than as Linda Kozlowski in her own right. The divorce settlement reportedly included a one-off payment to Linda of around $6.25 million, with the two sharing custody of their son Chance and neither party seeking additional spousal or child support. Despite the split, the two have maintained a relationship described as friendly in the years since, reportedly still checking in on each other from time to time. What came after the divorce is really where Linda Kozlowski's story stops looking like a typical, former Hollywood star narrative and starts looking like something more interesting. She didn't retreat into isolation, and she didn't spend the following decade chasing a comeback. Instead, she found something new, and it happened almost by accident. Through mutual friends, she met a Moroccan tour guide and location scout named Moulay Hafid Baba. The two connected around 2014, not long after her divorce, and their relationship developed from there, eventually leading to marriage in 2017. It's a genuinely unusual second act for someone who spent her 20s and 30s inside the Hollywood machine, trading red carpets for the Medinas of Marrakesh, and a famous comedian husband for a partner working in tourism and film location scouting, a profession that, in its own way, still connects to the industry she came from, just from a completely different angle. Together, Linda and Moulay built something new, a company called Dream My Destiny, based in Marrakesh, offering both tourist experiences and location scouting services for film productions looking to shoot in Morocco. It's a business that draws on both of their backgrounds, his knowledge of the country and its landscapes, and her decades of experience inside the film industry, understanding exactly what a location manager or a producer actually needs. These days, her life is split between two very different worlds, spending time in Los Angeles, where her son and her ex-husband still are, and Morocco, where her second husband and their business are based. It's a genuinely rare kind of reinvention, not a retirement into obscurity, not a desperate late career pivot back into acting, but an entirely new professional identity built from scratch, in a completely different country, well into her 50s. And then there's the part of this story that actually got people talking again in the first place. What she looks like now. Photos of Linda from recent public sightings, including one that circulated widely after she was spotted with Paul Hogan and their son Chance in Venice Beach, show a woman who looks strikingly different from the platinum blonde Sue Charlton audiences remember from the 80s. She's since been photographed as a brunette, dressed in an understated, effortlessly put-together style, tailored trousers, simple layered pieces, the kind of look that reads as comfortable rather than performed. It's not the look of someone trying to recreate a decades-old image. It's the look of someone who has settled fully into a completely different version of herself. That's really the detail that keeps catching people off guard. It's not that she's aged, everyone does that. It's that she looks like an entirely different person than the one frozen in the public's memory, because in a lot of meaningful ways, she is. There's a broader point buried in Linda Kozlowski's story that goes beyond just one actress and one franchise. Hollywood has a long, well-documented pattern of taking performers who break out in a single iconic role and then struggling, or simply refusing, to imagine them as anything else. It happened to plenty of actors from the 80s and 90s, locked into the shape of the character that made them famous, offered variations on that same part for years until the offers dried up entirely. What makes Linda's story worth revisiting isn't that this happened to her. It's what she did once it did. She didn't spend 2 decades publicly complaining about it or chasing a role that would prove she still belonged in that world. She said, on the record, exactly why she was frustrated, and then she left, on her own terms, and built something completely unrelated to acting that she apparently finds satisfying enough to keep doing for years afterward. It's also worth acknowledging what we don't actually know, because a lot of the whatever happened to content about former celebrities tends to fill in gaps with dramatic guesswork, presenting speculation as if it were confirmed fact. Linda Kozlowski hasn't given large numbers of tell-all interviews about her inner emotional life during those Hollywood years. What she has offered publicly is fairly specific and fairly measured. Comments about the kind of script she was being handed, comments about living in her famous husband's shadow, comments about splitting time between 2 countries now. Beyond that, a lot of her day-to-day life is genuinely private, and that appears to be by design. She's not maintaining a large public social media presence chronicling her every move, and she doesn't appear to be courting media attention the way she once had to as one of the most photographed actresses of her era. What does come through clearly, though, is the shape of the choice she made. She had a level of fame that most performers never come close to. A role that earned awards recognition, a franchise that remains genuinely beloved decades later, a marriage to another internationally famous performer. And at the point where the industry stopped offering her work she found meaningful, she didn't hang on. She stepped away, rebuilt a marriage and a business in a different country, on different terms, and has apparently been doing that quietly and steadily for the better part of a decade now. There's no scandal at the center of this story, no dramatic falling out, no tragic decline. Just a woman who looked at what fame was offering her, decided it wasn't enough on its own, and went and found something else. So the next time Crocodile Dundee comes on and Sue Charlton shows up on screen, refilling that canteen right before the crocodile nearly ends the scene, it's worth remembering that the woman playing her isn't a relic of the 80s frozen in time somewhere. She's out there right now, most likely somewhere between Los Angeles and Marrakesh, running a business with her husband, seeing her son, and living a life that very few people from that era of Hollywood ever managed to build for themselves. One that isn't defined by the role that made her famous in the first place. That's the real ending to Linda Kozlowski's story, and honestly, it's a better one than most of the versions that get repeated online. If you found this one interesting, let me know what other stars from that era you'd want covered next, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.